Hi everyone, so this is our first video on independent clauses and dependent clauses for language. And today is Friday, April 10th. Okay, so we're going to talk about commas. Commas are very difficult for a lot of people because it is like the math of grammar. Okay, it's pretty hard. But if you follow the steps, it can be kind of easy. There's just a lot of rules to commas that we're going to follow, okay? So first I'm going to explain what an independent clause is. An independent clause is a group of words that form their own sentence. It's a complete thought, and it both has a subject and a verb. It can also stand alone. Okay, so it makes sense all by itself. So if you went to say, I went to the store today, that's a whole independent clause. My foot hurts, that's an independent clause. Okay, so it's a whole complete sentence. Next, we're going to look at dependent clauses and what a dependent clause means. So a dependent clause basically means that it doesn't have all the parts to make a whole entire sentence. It's pretty much like a sentence fragment. Either you may have a subject and a verb, but it doesn't make sense all by itself, and it cannot stand alone. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read you some examples first to see if you know whether it's a independent clause, which I have the abbreviation IND, or is a dependent clause because it can't stand alone. It is a sentence fragment. It is not a complete thought. And let's abbreviate that with DEP. Okay, so I have a list of 12. How about when Mr. Jones yelled? When Mr. Jones yelled, independent or dependent? Well, that would be a dependent. When Mr. Jones yelled what? It doesn't complete a whole sentence, okay? The second one, I enjoy the opera. Well, that makes sense all by itself, so that would be an independent clause. The third one, unless it comes today. What do you think? Dependent? Independent? Well, that would be a dependent. Fourth one, although I lost the library book. That would be a dependent because it doesn't finish the whole sentence. They're going on a picnic. Does that make sense all by itself? Well, it should. So that would be an independent. How about mom found it in the drawer? Well, if we know what it means, and you're in the loop, then yes, it makes sense. So it would be a independent clause. The fifth graders sang. Yes, that would be an independent as well. When the movie is over. Well, when the movie is over, what? What's going to happen? We went to find a snack? What? So that would be a dependent when the movie is over. How about I decided to go along? That would be a independent. The strength of the man. What do you think? Dependent, independent, the strength of a man. Well, that would be a dependent because it doesn't make sense all by itself. We're planning to have a party. Well, that should be an independent because it makes sense all by itself. When I'm finished. When I'm finished, what's going to happen? What? I didn't tell you everything. So that would be a dependent. Okay, next we're going to look at how to combine two independent clauses. Now the important thing is when you join two independent clauses, you want to make sure that you have them connected with a conjunction. Okay, so a conjunction is, there's 7 different ones. Do you remember some of them? And, or, for, yet, so, nor, but. Hopefully that's 7 right there, and yes it is. Okay, so if you remember how I told you during class when we did the M level and the D level, how to join these together, how to join two independent clauses together, you're going to have one independent clause, you're going to put a comma, then you're going to put a conjunction, and then you're going to add another independent clause. Okay, remember, don't ever put a comma after that conjunction though. Okay? How about if I read this to you? I have an independent clause, and it says the team lost the match. Well, that makes sense all by itself. The team lost the match. And then I could say the fans cheered for the players. Well, those two independent thoughts have something to do with each other. Okay? So the team lost the match. So I could put the team lost the match, comma. I could add a conjunction such as yet. And then I could put the second part. The fans cheered for the players. Okay? The team lost the match, comma, yet the fans cheered for the players. How about I decided to take the dog out for a little walk? Okay, well that would be a whole complete IND, independent clause. I decided to take the dog out for a little walk, comma, which one of these conjunctions would sound good if I was to say for the second IND, it was a beautiful morning. You could say for, or you could say and. It was a beautiful morning. So I decided to take the dog out for a little walk, comma, for it was a beautiful morning. Well, another one would be swimming helps you stay fit. And then here's another IND. You have to keep at it to guarantee good results. Well, I need a conjunction right in the middle. So swimming helps you stay fit, comma, but you have to keep at it for good results. How about one more? Benjamin didn't know where to go. Okay, then here's another independent clause. He was not aware of whom to meet. So we could put a conjunction in there, and we could say, Benjamin didn't know where to go, comma, and he was not aware of whom to meet. Okay, so there are going to be more that I send you through pictures of worksheets. The next thing I want to do is, now that we know how to take an independent clause and connect it with another independent clause when it comes to a comma and a conjunction, we now need to look at how to take an independent clause and a dependent clause and now connect them together. Okay, so what if I said, I'm going to erase the conjunctions. What if I said something about from a distance? From a distance. Well, would that be an independent clause or a dependent clause? Well, hopefully you know that it is a dependent clause. How about if I said, I could see my house? What would that be? A dependent clause or an independent clause? Well, hopefully you would know that it's an independent clause. Now, we can combine these two sentences together, and there's two different ways we could do it. We could take the dependent clause first, and then we could take the independent clause lastly, and we need to connect these together. But we need to figure out, do we need a comma? Well, if you have the dependent clause first and the independent clause last, yes, you will need a comma. So, how you would say that sentence is, from a distance, comma, I could see my house. Now, could we flip these two sentences around? Well, yeah, we could. We could put the independent clause first, and then we could put the dependent clause last. And we could say, I could see my house from a distance. But if you put the independent clause first and the dependent clause last, there is no comma. So make sure that you take note of that. The dependent comes first, the independent comes last. Yes, you need a comma. If the independent comes first, the dependent comes last, there is no comma. Okay, let's try a few more sentences here. All right. How about coming to a fork in the road? What do you think that would be, an independent or a dependent? Well, that would be a dependent clause because it doesn't make sense all by itself. What about the rest of this? We stopped and looked at the map. Okay, what one would that be? We stopped and looked at the map. Well, that one would be the independent clause. So, let's go ahead and put this one first, the dependent clause, and we can say, coming to a fork in the road, comma, we stopped and looked at the map. So if you did the dependent first, the independent one last, you need a comma there. Okay. How about if you have this? Jay nibbled the burger. To be polite. Okay, I know there's a lot of times where we don't like what someone may serve us. So poor Jay here, he decided he didn't like that burger too much, but he didn't want to be rude, so he took a little nibble out of it. Okay? Now, Jay nibbled the burger to be polite. Would that be a complete sentence and be an independent clause, or would that be a dependent clause and it doesn't make sense all by itself? Which one? Well, hopefully you know that it's going to be an independent clause. But the rest of the sentence says, although he doesn't like meat. Oh no, that's awful. Jay doesn't like meat. Although he doesn't like meat. Whoops. Now, although he doesn't like meat, would that be a whole complete thought and would be an independent clause, or would this be a dependent clause? Well, it would be a dependent clause. So we're going to go ahead and put this part of the sentence first. Jay nibbled the burger to be polite, although, and we're going to make this a small a to finish the rest of the sentence, although he doesn't like meat. Now the question is, do we need a comma in here? Well, if you look down here, the IND comes first, then the DEP comes second, so no comma. Okay? Okay, how about after Gabrielle jumped for the ball and hit the floor. Poor Gabrielle. She's taking a beating today. Okay. Would that be a dependent clause or would it be an independent clause? After Gabrielle jumped for the ball and hit the floor, well, if you said dependent clause, you are correct. It doesn't make sense all by itself. Well, what happened? We have no clue. It doesn't finish the sentence. But if I said she heard a crunch, oh my goodness, well, that would be an independent clause. So let's put this in order. The dependent comes first. After Gabrielle jumped for the ball and hit the floor, she heard a crunch. The question is, do we need a comma? Well, if you look down here, the dependent comes first, the independent comes last. Yes, we need a comma, and where is that going to go? The comma is going to come after floor. All right. Now, we're going to go ahead and take a look at using the words yes and no. Okay, so if you say yes or you say no, make sure that when they're at the beginning of the sentence, you put a comma after yes, a comma after no. So you can say, yes, comma, you may borrow the car tonight. No, comma, you're grounded. Yes, comma, I love the weather today, period. No, comma, it's been raining all afternoon and I don't like the weather. Okay, so make sure you take note of that. Okay, another one would be if we have what's called a complex sentence. So what I showed you there is a compound sentence, okay? And a compound sentence can be made up of two independent clauses. And remember, it has the comma and it has a conjunction. That would be called a compound sentence. Now, the complex sentence is what I just got finished showing you, the complex sentence, and that would be when you have the dependent clause and then the independent clause. Remember, do I need a comma in there? Yes, I do. But if you flip it around, I do not need a comma, so no comma in between, okay? This would be a complex sentence. This would be a compound sentence. What I'm going to show you right now is what is a compound subject and what is a compound verb. Well, a compound subject would be when you have two nouns, person, place, thing, idea, or feeling, and you are joined by the word and or one of the conjunctions, okay? So if I said Cheryl and Sean own a clothing store, well, Cheryl and Sean would be the compound subject. I do not need a comma in between them because there's two subjects. If there was more than two, it would be considered a comma in a series, and we're going to look at that in another video, okay? If I said something like Thornton was generous and jolly. Well, what would be the compound subject inside of this? It would be generous, jolly. Okay? That would be the compound subject, so we would not put a comma in between there. How about if I said, the suitcase and plants were heavy. The suitcase and plants were heavy. Well, suitcase, and I'm going to put the plants. Suitcase and plants would be the compound subject because they're things, right? Okay, so you would not need a comma in between suitcase and plants. Okay, what about a compound verb? We're going to look at compound verbs. Remember, a verb shows action. Okay, you could also have a verb phrase. A verb is just one word that shows action. A verb phrase is a few words that show action. Okay, so if I said something like, Tim cooked the chicken and stirred the macaroni. Now, what word would be the subject in that sentence? Well, it would be Tim, because he is a person. Person, place, or thing would be your subject, right? Now, what would be the verb or verb phrase? Well, one of them would be cooked the chicken. That's a verb phrase. And then stirred the macaroni. So you have two verb phrases there, and they are joined by the word and. So you will not need to put a comma in there. That is known as a compound verb phrase. Okay, let's do a couple more. How about Barbara Well, Barbara saw a bear and ran for her life. What do you think? What is the subject? Well, the subject is Barbara. That's your subject. What is your compound verb or verb phrase? Compound, remember, means two. Saw a bear. She saw a bear, so that shows action. And she ran for her life. Okay, so there is a compound verb. Okay, let's talk about Barbara one more time. What else did Barbara do? Well, Barbara chopped and stacked the firewood. Well, we know that Barbara is the subject. Is there a compound verb or a compound verb phrase? Well, there is compound verbs in here. Chopped, stacked. That would be a compound verb. All right. Okay, well that's it for now until I make the next video. Have a good day.